Chapter 13. We spent the rest of the school day on high alert. Twice, during math class, Wiki and I noticed Blackbeard peeking through the hall window into our classroom as he mopped. Then, during science, he was sweeping the playground outside our classroom, and every time I looked out, he met my eyes with a dark smile. We were in gym class playing kickball, and Wiki pointed subtly to the bleachers at the other side of the gym. There was Blackbeard, sitting with a shovel across his lap and staring at us like we had targets on our foreheads. "I can't take much more of this, Wiki," I whispered while we waited in line to kick the ball. He nodded. "Is he going to give us 3 days? He's clearly not a patient man, and pirates weren't known for their honesty. Also, how are we going to make a plan if he's always around the corner watching us?" "He might follow us home," Wiki whispered. "Clearly he remembers where we live." "Oh, right," I whispered back. "Ugh, I don't want to see him standing in the middle of my backyard at night. That's nightmare fuel for life." I looked over at Piratey McPirateface, and he was still staring straight at us. By the way, I hope pirates can't read lips. "We're as good as dead," Wiki said. "We're as good as dead," I repeated. "Javier Santiago, Brady Santiago, Will Green, please report to the office," the intercom blared. "Ooh," chanted the class. "Someone's in trouble." "More like someone just got their life saved. I've never been happier about having to report to the principal." Wiki and I practically skipped all the way to the high school, and you know who didn't follow us? His name rhymes with Frackbeard. "Have a seat, children," Principal Gale said as we walked into her office. When I say principal's office, you're probably thinking gross vomit green carpet, dumb posters of cats saying stuff like "hang in there," and boring office supplies all lined up neatly on an old desk. This was the opposite of that. Principal Gale's office looked like it belonged to Merlin. It was in the castle, so the walls, floor, and ceiling were all made of stone. 2 enormous torches lit the room, giving it the vibe of a haunted house when the curtains were drawn. There were all sorts of ornate tools and instruments hanging from the walls, some which I'd never seen before in a museum or a book. In one corner there was a big cage covered by some fancy fabric. Everyone had theories about what lived in the cage. Principal Gale's stone desk looked like it was right at home in a castle, and her chair was actually a throne that felt like it belonged to King Arthur. On her desk she had an emerald orb that matched the emerald necklace she always wore. All in all, it was almost impossible to pay attention to Principal Gale while you were in there, because your eyes kept wandering to all the awesome stuff everywhere. "Thanks so much for heading over so quickly, and apologies for interrupting your classes," the principal said sweetly. "How is your week going so far?" Great? Yeah, good, really good. Having a great week, thanks. Really, really top-notch. Weeks are awesome. I love weeks. The stupid words just kept plopping out of my mouth. Everyone gave me a weird look. "It's been pretty good," Brady said, trying to save me from my own awkwardness. "I would give it a solid 8 if 1 is dreadful and 10 is superlative," Wiki echoed, nodding. Principal Gale kept her smile, but I could see the tiniest hint of suspicion forming at the edges of it. "Excellent. Glad to hear it," she continued. "I was curious about your thoughts on our new groundskeeper, Mr. Teach." Gulp. "But Mr. Teach? Who is that?" Wiki squeaked, trying to play dumb, but just looking dumb instead. "He seems all right," Brady said calmly. Why was Brady the master of staying cool under pressure? Did she go to spy school on the weekends? "I see," the principal said slowly. Awkward silence. "I must say, when I stumbled onto your conversation with him, it appeared to me that you'd met before. Have you? Perhaps he's a neighbor or a family friend?" "Blackbeard, a family friend? That's hilarious," I said, before realizing what had just come out of my mouth. Brady and Wiki shot daggers at me with their eyes. I'd seen Brady's look before. The way she squinted meant, "Are you really that stupid?" "We've never met him before. Seems like a nice enough guy," Brady said blandly. Another awkward silence. I couldn't look Principal Gale in the eye, so I just stared at her necklace. "Has anything strange happened to you 3 over the past week? Anything at all?" I stopped myself from saying something dumb this time, but my eyes went super wide, which was maybe even dumber than all the other things I said before. Strange? Brady looked over at me. My brother's a weirdo, so life is always strange with him around. But other than his extreme weirdness, nothing else strange. Yes, I concur. Nothing odd about this week at all, Wiki said, maybe a little too quickly. The awkwardest silence of all. This one seemed to last forever. Well, all right then. I brought you up here because I thought you'd met Mr. Teach before, and I wanted you to know that our new groundskeeper is a bit rough around the edges. He had a difficult past, but he's a changed man. He apologized for his past behavior and wants nothing more than to live a peaceful life with our community. Was that the lie Blackbeard fed her? I wanted to say something, but I'd already opened my mouth too many times, so I just stared blankly at Principal Gale. So did Brady and Wiki. More awkward silence. In any event, thanks so much for coming to see me. If you change your minds, or if something strange happens and you have no one you feel comfortable telling, please don't hesitate to see me. My door is always open. Thank you, Wiki said as we all quickly got up and started making our way out the door. One more thing, Gale said right before we were out the door. We turned around nervously. Javi, that was a great essay you wrote for Ms. Vlad. It was so creative, but it felt so real. You deserved that A++. She read my essay? I nodded awkwardly, made a funny noise, and we stumbled out of the room. I felt so confused, embarrassed, and dumb that I was dizzy and couldn't say anything. Wiki was probably just feeling confused, but Brady snapped us out of it. Guys, it's 5 minutes before the bell rings and school's over. If we just head straight into the woods from here, we might lose Blackbeard. Brilliant idea, Brady, Wiki said as we tiptoed down the high school stairwell. However, we need to devour every book written about Blackbeard and pirates, and we're right next to the best place in town to do that. Then let's make a run for it, I said. Now. We dashed down one hall, took a left, and then caught our breath as we walked calmly into the high school library. Chapter 14. Finistier's library is massive and windowless, with walls made of stone and ceilings so high you can't see them. It's a cross between an endless cave and a sorcerer's basement. The bookshelves aren't exactly kid-friendly either. There must be 15 rows of books on them, and I can only reach the first 3, maybe 4 on my tippy-toes. Otherwise, you have to ask Mr. Bottom, the librarian, to bring over his ginormous iron ladder, which makes an ear-piercing squeak whenever he wheels it around. And yeah, his name is Mr. Bottom. We called him Mr. Butt behind his back for a few weeks when we first met him, but he's way too nice, so we stopped. Might I be of assistance, Master Green? Mr. Bottom asked as we walked past the front desk toward the stacks. Mr. B had a thick British accent and talked and dressed like an English prince from the olden days. He knew Wiki super well because Wiki basically lived at the library after school. Hi, Mr. Bottom. I need to do some research on pirates. I'm guessing the Dewey Decimal number is in the low 900s? 910 to be precise. Well done. I imagine that you'll be wanting primary sources only, per usual? Wiki nodded. Translation, Wiki? Brady whispered. I want the original books written about pirates, not the kiddie stuff that summarizes it. Brady rolled her eyes. Mr. B took us through a few tall shelves toward the back wall of the library. The back of the library was kind of spooky because there were fewer torches, and it got pretty dark and dank. You could barely read the names of books back there. If Mr. B was with you, it didn't really matter, though, because he'd basically memorized every single book in the library, and there must have been 1,000,000 books. The iron ladder was only a few shelves away, so Mr. B wheeled it over and then climbed to the very top. Wiki explained that most of the old books in the library were hidden away at the top shelf where only Mr. B could access them. It can't be normal for a school library to have ancient books, but at Finisterre it didn't even surprise me. Book, my kingdom for that book. Aha! Here is the very tome I'm looking for. Mr. B pulled out a tome, and even in the darkness I could see the dust flutter around it. He climbed down the stairs and presented it to Wiki like it was treasure. Master Green, may I present you with the classic text, A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates. Wiki said. I'm embarrassed to admit that I haven't read this one. Brady rolled her eyes again. An interesting tidbit, then. Most of our knowledge of pirates comes from this single source. One book to explain such a rich and riotous period of our history, it boggles the mind, no?" Wiki nodded as he flipped to the first page. I looked over his shoulder and it read, "As the pirates in the West Indies have been so formidable that they have interrupted the trade of Europe in those parts." Was this even in English? "Mr. B," I said, raising my hand for some reason, "can Brady and I read the kids' pirate books?" An hour later we were the only ones in the library, huddled over a few books that we'd laid out on one of the desks next to the shelves. Wiki read lightning fast, so he'd made it through most of his old book and part of another one, while Brady and I were just finishing the Blackbeard chapter of our pirate books. "If we're looking for his kryptonite, I'm not really seeing much," I said. "Honestly, I'm just 1,000% more scared now that I know what this guy was like back then. He used to light his beard on fire before attacking a ship, and in Mexico they called him El Gran Diablo, the Great Devil." "Unfortunately, this text isn't helping much either," Wiki said, finally looking up from his book. "Not a lot is known about Blackbeard himself, only his dastardly acts. Here's what I jotted down. What have you got?" After comparing notes, this is what we knew. 1. Blackbeard was no dummy. Historians were pretty sure he was well educated and a big reader. There were tons of books found on his ship. 2. The dude had no fear. Beardo got his reputation in less than a year of piracy because he took over harbors, set ports on fire, and hijacked ships that were way bigger than his. 3. And what a reputation! Freakbeard was America's nightmare. He scared colonial Americans more than anyone else in existence, even more than a comet, one writer from them back then said. I guess comets were super scary in pirate times. 4. He preferred intimidation to violence. Apparently the scariest guy in the world didn't love killing people as much as scaring the pants off them. Wait, Brady said, after Wiki revealed that last point. "So he's all bark and no bite? What are we afraid of, then? I'm all bite and no bark." Brady started looking for something to roundhouse kick. "Don't get cocky," Wiki said. "He's got plenty of bite. Pirates were constantly taking over ships, but attacking a ship meant you'd ruin it before you stole it. Intimidate your enemy, and the ship stays good as new. Intimidation was a smarter tactic." Wiki let out a long sigh. "Honestly, I'd rather he was more bloodthirsty and violent. He is far more cunning an opponent than I imagined. The way he charms his enemies and then backstabs them is particularly alarming." "Well, you heard the principal," I said. "He's pretending to be Mr. Smiley Nice Guy pirate to the teachers, while he's Mr. Stabby Murderfest pirate to us, and so far the teachers seem to be buying it." "Shh," Brady said. She walked forward a few steps and peered down a long line of shelves. Then she motioned to us. Standing in front of a desk, reading a huge map laid out on it by torchlight, was Mr. Teach himself. Mr. B was standing next to him and answering his questions. Blackbeard kept pointing to different areas as Mr. B spoke and nodded. He had his hand on Mr. B's shoulder in full friendly pirate mode. "What's he up to?" Brady whispered. "I'm not sure," Wiki whispered back, "but he's definitely learning all he can about the modern world. And how to take it over," I added. At that, Blackbeard looked up, and we scrambled all the way home in a full sprint.